Nathan Parker adjusted his watch at the upscale bistro, expecting another forgettable blind date. But when she sat down and smiled, his blood ran cold. "You don't remember me, do you?" 5 words that would destroy everything he'd built. Like, comment and subscribe so we can keep sharing stories like this. Nathan Parker had perfected the art of the power entrance. At 35, he'd learned that success wasn't just about what you accomplished. It was about how you made others perceive your accomplishments. Tonight was no different. He stepped into the Riverside Bistro, one of the city's most exclusive dining establishments, with the practiced confidence of someone who belonged in places where reservations required connections and entrees cost more than most people's weekly grocery budget. The maitre d' recognized him immediately. "Mr. Parker, your table is ready." "The corner booth as requested?" Nathan's voice carried that particular tone of someone accustomed to getting exactly what they wanted. "Of course, sir. Your guest hasn't arrived yet." Nathan nodded, slipping a folded bill into the man's hand with the casual generosity of someone for whom money was simply a tool of influence. He made his way through the restaurant, aware of the glances he attracted. The tailored suit that cost more than some people's monthly rent, the watch that whispered rather than shouted wealth, the haircut that could only come from an exclusive stylist. Every detail was calculated. His friend Marcus had set up this blind date, swearing that this woman was different from the usual crowd. Nathan had his doubts. In his experience, blind dates rarely delivered anything more than mediocre conversation and manufactured chemistry. But Marcus had been insistent, almost peculiarly so, promising that this would be an evening Nathan would never forget. As he settled into the corner booth with its perfect view of the restaurant and the city lights beyond, Nathan reviewed what little he knew. Her name was Emma. She worked in the non-profit sector, not exactly impressive by his standards, but Marcus had insisted she was extraordinary. Nathan had learned to translate such descriptions. Extraordinary usually meant she had a personality quirky enough to make up for a lack of professional achievement or social status. His phone buzzed with messages from his investment firm. Even on a Friday evening, the market never truly slept, and neither did Nathan's ambitions. He was in the middle of responding to a client when a voice interrupted his focus. "Nathan Parker?" He looked up, ready to deliver his practiced, charming smile, but something made him pause. The woman standing beside his table was striking in a way that went beyond conventional beauty. There was something in her eyes, a depth, an intelligence, a knowing quality that made him slightly uncomfortable. She wore professional attire that suggested success without ostentation, and she carried herself with a confidence that seemed earned rather than performed. "That's me," Nathan said, rising with practiced politeness and extending his hand. "You must be Emma." "Emma Richardson," she confirmed, her handshake firm and her gaze steady. As she sat down across from him, Nathan felt an unusual sensation, something he couldn't quite identify. It wasn't attraction, though she was certainly attractive. It was something closer to unease, like standing on ground that seemed solid but might not be. "Marcus speaks very highly of you," Nathan began, deploying his standard opening line. "Does he?" Emma's smile was enigmatic. "That's interesting. He speaks quite interestingly about you as well." Nathan wasn't sure if that was a compliment or something else entirely. He decided to shift to safer territory. "So, you work in nonprofits? That must be fulfilling." The pause before fulfilling was calculated. In Nathan's world, nonprofit was often code for couldn't make it in the real economy. He'd perfected the art of appearing interested in careers he privately considered beneath serious consideration. "It has its rewards," Emma replied, her tone giving nothing away. "Though I imagine your work in investment banking offers different kinds of satisfaction." "Different, certainly. The pace is relentless, the stakes are high. But when you're good at what you do, when you can see patterns others miss, identify opportunities that others overlook, there's nothing quite like it." "Interesting choice of words," Emma observed. "Seeing patterns others miss, identifying opportunities others overlook." Before Nathan could respond, the server arrived to take their drink orders. Nathan ordered a wine that cost more than many people earned in a day, a subtle flex he'd used countless times to establish the evening's financial dynamics. Emma ordered sparkling water. When they were alone again, Emma leaned forward slightly, her gaze intensifying. "Nathan, can I ask you something before we go any further?" "Of course." "You don't remember me, do you?" The question landed like a physical blow. Nathan felt his carefully constructed confidence waver. He studied her face more carefully, searching for something familiar, but came up empty. Was this some kind of test? A game? He'd encountered women before who claimed previous connections to seem more interesting, but something about Emma's tone suggested this was different. Should I? Nathan tried to keep his voice light, but he could hear the uncertainty creeping in. Emma didn't answer immediately. Instead, she took a slow sip of water, her eyes never leaving his face. The silence stretched, becoming uncomfortable. Nathan felt sweat beginning to form at the back of his neck, despite the restaurant's perfect climate control. 10 years ago, Emma finally said, her voice quiet but clear. "You and I had an interaction. Brief, but memorable. At least it was memorable for one of us." Nathan's mind raced backward. 10 years ago, he would have been 25, fresh out of business school, working his first real position at Whitmore and Associates. Those had been hungry years, climbing years, when every interaction was calculated for maximum advantage and minimum waste of time. "I meet a lot of people," Nathan said carefully. "My work brings me into contact with hundreds of individuals. If we crossed paths, and I don't immediately recall—" "Oh, we didn't just cross paths," Emma interrupted, her smile never wavering but something hardening in her eyes. "We had what you might call a significant interaction. Though significant might be too generous a word for how you experienced it." The unease Nathan had felt earlier blossomed into something closer to panic. He prided himself on his memory, especially for people who might be useful to him. But Emma's face, while striking, triggered no specific recollection. Had he dated her and forgotten? Offended her somehow? The possibilities spun through his mind, each more uncomfortable than the last. "Look," Nathan said, deciding honesty might be his best strategy. "I apologize if we met before and I'm not immediately placing you. It's not that you're not memorable. Clearly you are. But I'd hate to pretend I remember something I don't." "How refreshingly honest," Emma said, though her tone suggested she found it anything but refreshing. "Tell me, Nathan, do you remember working at the Whitmore and Associates office downtown? The one in the Sterling building?" "Of course. That was my first position after my MBA. Do you remember the people who worked there? Your colleagues, your superiors, the people who kept the office running?" Nathan felt like he was being led into a trap, but couldn't see how to avoid it. "Some of them, certainly. My team, the other analysts, the senior partners." "What about the people who weren't on your level?" Emma's voice remained pleasant, but there was steel underneath. "The administrative staff, the assistants, the people who, say, brought coffee to meetings or coordinated schedules or made sure the office actually functioned?" A cold realization was beginning to form in Nathan's gut. He'd been so focused on networking upward during those years, on impressing the people who could advance his career, that he'd barely noticed the support staff. They'd been part of the scenery, functional but forgettable. "Emma," Nathan said slowly, a terrible suspicion forming. "Were you?" "I was the assistant coordinator for the analyst program," Emma said, her voice matter of fact. "I worked there for 2 years while finishing my master's degree at night. I scheduled your meetings, coordinated your travel, prepared your presentation materials. I was there almost every day, often arriving before you and leaving after you. We had hundreds of interactions." Nathan felt the blood draining from his face. Fragments of memory were surfacing now. A young woman, always busy, always efficient. Someone he'd relied on without really seeing. How many times had he snapped at her for minor delays? How many times had he treated her as simply part of the office machinery? Nathan started, but words failed him. "There was one interaction in particular," Emma continued, her voice still calm but with an edge that suggested years of contained emotion. "Do you remember the Hartwell pitch? The one that made your reputation at the firm?" Nathan remembered. The Hartwell pitch had been his breakthrough moment, the presentation that had caught the senior partner's attention and set him on the path to where he was now. It had been brilliant, innovative, exactly the kind of aggressive strategy that Hartwell Industries needed. "I remember the pitch," Nathan said carefully. "Do you remember who put together your presentation materials? Who stayed until midnight for 3 consecutive nights making sure every slide was perfect? Every data point was verified, every graphic was precisely aligned. The coldness in Nathan's stomach spread to his limbs. He didn't remember, or rather, he'd never thought to remember. The presentation had been his vision, his strategy, his triumph. The execution details had seemed beneath his notice. "That was you," Nathan said, though it wasn't really a question. "That was me," Emma confirmed. "And do you remember what you said to me the morning of the presentation, when I handed you the materials?" Nathan shook his head, though he was beginning to guess. "You looked at the presentation, which was perfect, by the way, and you said, 'About time. Try to be more efficient next time. I shouldn't have to wait until the last minute for basic support work.'" Emma's voice remained even, but Nathan could see her knuckles whitening as she gripped her water glass. "You didn't say thank you. You didn't acknowledge the 3 nights I'd sacrificed. You certainly didn't mention my contribution when you received accolades for the pitch." The restaurant suddenly felt too warm, too bright, too public. Nathan wanted to disappear, to rewind time, to become someone who had been better 10 years ago. "Emma, Oh, but that's not even the best part," Emma interrupted, her smile now carrying something that made Nathan deeply uncomfortable. "Do you want to know what happened after that presentation?" Nathan wasn't sure he did, but he nodded anyway. "After your pitch succeeded brilliantly, after you were celebrated and promoted, I made a suggestion to HR. I proposed that the firm create a system to recognize support staff contributions to major projects. Nothing dramatic, just acknowledgement. Maybe small bonuses for exceptional work. Do you know what I was told?" Nathan could barely breathe. "I was told that support staff were compensated for doing their jobs and that seeking additional recognition was inappropriate. I was told that if I wanted credit for strategic work, I should pursue an analyst position myself. So I did. I applied for the next analyst opening at Whitmore & Associates. And," Nathan whispered, though he was terrified of the answer. "And you were on the review committee," Emma said softly. "Do you remember that?" Nathan's mind was reeling. He'd served on several hiring committees during his time at Whitmore, reviewing countless applications. Had Emma been among them? There were so many applications." "Oh, I'm sure there were," Emma agreed. "But you might remember this particular committee meeting because there was a discussion about one candidate, me, who had excellent grades, strong recommendations, and extensive knowledge of the firm's operations. Do you remember what you said?" Nathan felt like he might be sick. "You said," Emma continued, her voice now carrying a weight of years, "that hiring from the support staff would lower the bar and that the analyst program should maintain its elite standards. You said that if someone was meant to be an analyst, they would have started at that level, rather than working their way up from administrative roles. You convinced the committee to reject my application." The words hung in the air between them like an accusation and a verdict combined. Nathan wanted to protest, to claim he didn't remember saying those things, but the words sounded exactly like something his 25-year-old self would have said. That Nathan Parker had been ambitious, ruthless, and utterly convinced that the world was divided into people who mattered and people who served those who mattered. "Emma, I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything yet," Emma replied. "We have the whole evening ahead of us, and I have so much more to tell you about what happened after that day, about where I am now, about why Marcus was so insistent that we meet." Nathan's phone buzzed again with messages from his firm, but for the first time in years he ignored it completely. He was trapped, not physically, he could leave any time, but trapped by shame, by curiosity, by the growing realization that this woman across from him held something over him that was far more powerful than any business leverage he'd ever wielded. "Why did you agree to this date?" Nathan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why meet me now?" Emma's smile was enigmatic, revealing nothing and everything. "Because, Nathan, sometimes the universe offers us opportunities we can't refuse, and sometimes the people we overlook have a way of becoming impossible to ignore." As the server approached to take their dinner orders, Nathan realized that this evening was going to be exactly what Marcus had promised. Unforgettable, but not in any way Nathan could have imagined. The corner booth that had seemed like a position of power now felt like a witness stand, and Nathan Parker, who had always prided himself on controlling every situation, was about to discover that some debts eventually come due, even ones you never knew you owed. Nathan's hand trembled slightly as he reached for his water glass. The confident man who had walked into the Riverside Bistro 30 minutes ago felt like a stranger now, replaced by someone who couldn't quite meet the eyes of the woman sitting across from him. Emma Richardson watched him with an expression that was neither cruel nor kind, simply observant, as if she were studying a specimen under glass. "Shall we order?" Emma asked, picking up her menu with the ease of someone completely comfortable with the situation. "I hear the salmon here is exceptional." The casual suggestion felt surreal. Nathan's mind was still reeling from her revelations, yet here she was, discussing dinner, as if they were simply two professionals enjoying an evening out. He opened his menu without seeing it, the words blurring together into meaningless shapes. "Emma," Nathan said, his voice hoarse, "I need to understand. What happened after I blocked your application?" Emma set down her menu, folding her hands on the table with deliberate precision. "Are you sure you want to know? We could order first. I find these conversations go better on a full stomach." "Please," Nathan said, and he heard the desperation in his own voice. "I need to know." Emma studied him for a long moment, as if deciding whether he was truly ready for what came next. Finally, she nodded. "After Whitmore rejected my analyst application, I was devastated. Not just disappointed, devastated. I'd spent 2 years doing exceptional work, earning a master's degree at night, sacrificing any semblance of personal life. And I was rejected because someone decided that where you start determines where you deserve to end up." Nathan felt each word like a physical blow. "I went home that night and cried for hours. Then I got angry. Not the hot, explosive anger that burns out quickly, but the cold, determined kind that changes people fundamentally." Emma's voice remained steady, but Nathan could hear the steel underneath. "I decided that if Whitmore and Associates wouldn't recognize my value, I'd find somewhere that would." "Where did you go?" Nathan asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted the answer. "I took a position at Henderson Strategic Group. You've heard of them?" Nathan's stomach dropped. Henderson was Whitmore's primary competitor, known for being more innovative, more aggressive, and increasingly more successful. In the 10 years since Nathan had left Whitmore, Henderson had steadily gained market share, eventually surpassing Whitmore in several key sectors. "You went to Henderson," Nathan repeated, the implications cascading through his mind. "I did. And unlike Whitmore, Henderson had a program specifically designed to identify and promote talented individuals regardless of their entry point. Within a year, I was a junior analyst. Within 3 years, I was leading projects. Within 5 years, I was a senior strategist." Emma paused, letting the timeline sink in. Nathan did the math quickly. 5 years ago, she would have been 30, already surpassing the level he'd been at when he dismissed her application. "And now?" Nathan asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer would be even more uncomfortable. "Now I'm the Director of Strategic Development at Henderson. I oversee 12 project teams, manage relationships with our top 50 clients, and sit on the executive board. Last year, I was named one of the industry's top innovators, under 40. The restaurant suddenly felt like it was tilting. Nathan had spent 10 years clawing his way to senior vice president at his current firm, a position he'd considered a triumph. Emma had not only caught up, she'd potentially surpassed him, and she'd done it while overcoming obstacles he'd personally placed in her path. That's impressive," Nathan managed, the words feeling inadequate. "Is it?" Emma's smile was enigmatic. "Or is it simply what happens when someone is given the opportunity to show what they're actually capable of?" Before Nathan could respond, the server arrived. Emma ordered with confidence, recommending specific dishes and wine pairings, with the ease of someone who regularly dined in establishments like this. Nathan ordered without tasting the words, barely aware of what he'd requested. When they were alone again, Emma continued as if there had been no interruption. "But here's what I really want you to understand, Nathan. The career success, while satisfying, isn't the most important part of this story. Do you want to know what really drove me during those years?" Nathan nodded, incapable of speech. "Every time I hit a milestone, every time I closed a major deal, every time I was promoted or recognized, I thought about that review committee meeting. I thought about you saying that people like me would lower the bar. And I promised myself that someday, somehow, you would know exactly who you'd dismissed." "Is that why you agreed to this date?" Nathan asked. "For revenge?" Emma's laugh was genuine, which somehow made it more unsettling. Revenge. That's such a dramatic word. No, Nathan. I'm not here for revenge. Revenge would be petty, personal, emotional. I'm here for something much more interesting. What then? Accountability, Emma said simply. And education. And perhaps, if you're capable of it, growth. Nathan felt like he was drowning. I don't understand. Let me explain. After Henderson promoted me to director, I started thinking about systemic issues in our industry. The way we treat support staff, the barriers we create for talented people who don't fit narrow definitions of elite, the waste of human potential that happens when we judge people by arbitrary criteria rather than actual capability. Emma leaned forward, her intensity increasing. I started a research project, Nathan. I identified 20 people who had been rejected from analyst programs at top firms despite strong qualifications. Do you know what I found? Nathan shook his head. 15 of them went on to significant success elsewhere. 3 started their own firms. 5 became senior executives at competitor companies. 2 are now running nonprofits that outperform anything in the commercial sector. And every single one of them was rejected for reasons that had nothing to do with their actual abilities. Wrong school, wrong background, wrong entry point, wrong connections. And me? Nathan asked, already knowing the answer would be painful. You, Nathan Parker, were on review committees that rejected 7 of those 20 people. 7 talented individuals whose careers you tried to limit because they didn't fit your narrow definition of who deserved opportunity. The number hit Nathan like a physical force. 7 people, 7 lives potentially altered by his arrogance, his elitism, his inability to see value in anyone who hadn't followed his exact path. Emma, Nathan started, but she held up a hand. I'm not finished. Here's the really interesting part. I tracked what happened at the firms that rejected these people. Do you want to guess? Nathan couldn't speak. Every single one of those firms has struggled in the past 5 years. Whitmore and Associates, where you started, has lost 30% of its market share. The firm where you work now is facing similar challenges. Meanwhile, companies like Henderson that implemented inclusive hiring practices are thriving. It turns out that when you systematically exclude talented people based on arbitrary criteria, you don't maintain elite standards. You just become mediocre. Emma picked up her wine glass, studying the liquid thoughtfully. The industry is changing, Nathan. The old rules, the old hierarchies, the old assumptions about who deserves opportunity, they're dying. And the people who clung to those assumptions are finding themselves increasingly irrelevant. Is that what I am? Nathan asked quietly. Irrelevant? That's what you're becoming, Emma corrected. But here's the fascinating thing. You don't have to be. That's why I agreed to this date. Nathan looked up, confused. I don't understand. If you think I'm part of a dying system, why would you want to help me? Because Marcus asked me to, Emma said simply. Marcus Lawrence, your friend who set up this date. Do you know how Marcus and I know each other? Nathan realized he'd never asked. He'd been so caught up in his own assumptions and then his own panic that he'd never questioned the connection. Marcus was one of the 20 people I researched, Emma said. He applied to Whitmore 12 years ago. He was rejected by a committee that included your mentor, Gordon Hayes, the man who taught you most of what you know about the industry. Nathan felt the floor dropping out from under him. Marcus Lawrence was one of his oldest friends, someone he'd known since business school. Marcus had gone on to tremendous success in private equity, building a reputation for identifying undervalued opportunities that everyone else missed. Marcus was rejected from Whitmore? Nathan repeated numbly. He was. Wrong undergraduate institution, apparently. Not elite enough. So he went elsewhere, built his own path, and became more successful than most Whitmore analysts ever dream of becoming. Emma paused. And unlike some people, Marcus understood what that rejection taught him. It taught him to look for value where others don't, to recognize that talent doesn't always come in expected packages. Why didn't he ever tell me? Nathan asked. He did, Emma said gently. Multiple times. But you never really listened. You heard the success story but missed the lesson underneath it. Nathan tried to remember conversations with Marcus, but they blurred together. How many times had Marcus tried to challenge his assumptions? How many times had Nathan dismissed those challenges as Marcus being overly idealistic? Marcus called me 6 months ago, Emma continued. He'd heard about my research project and wanted to contribute to it. We started talking about the industry, about people we'd both observed, about systemic problems and potential solutions. Your name came up. What did he say about me? Nathan asked, not sure he wanted the answer. He said you were one of the smartest people he knew, and one of the most blind. He said you had tremendous potential that was being wasted because you couldn't see beyond your own narrow worldview. He said you'd hurt people without meaning to, not because you were malicious, but because you literally couldn't see them as fully human. The assessment was brutal in its accuracy. Nathan felt tears threatening but forced them back. Marcus said something else too, Emma added, her voice softening slightly. He said that underneath the arrogance and the elitism, there was someone worth saving. He said you were capable of growth if someone could break through your defenses. And he asked me if I'd be willing to try. Why would you agree? Nathan asked. After everything I did to you, why would you want to help me? Emma was quiet for a long moment, her eyes distant. Do you remember what I do now, Nathan? I work in nonprofits. Specifically, I work with organizations that identify and develop overlooked talent, people from backgrounds like mine who have ability but lack opportunity. You left Henderson? Nathan asked, surprised. 2 years ago, after making enough money that I'd never have to worry about it again, I decided to dedicate my career to something that mattered more than profit margins. I now run a foundation that provides training, mentoring, and opportunities to talented individuals who are systematically excluded from traditional paths to success. Emma leaned forward, her intensity returning. I've spent 2 years helping people overcome the kind of barriers you used to represent. And I've learned something important. The people who build those barriers aren't usually evil. They're usually just ignorant, operating on assumptions they've never questioned. And sometimes, with the right push, they can become allies instead of obstacles. You think I can change? Nathan asked, hearing the vulnerability in his own voice. I think you're capable of change, Emma corrected. Whether you will change is entirely up to you. That's why I agreed to this date, to give you a choice. You can continue down your current path, becoming increasingly irrelevant as the world changes around you. Or you can open your eyes, acknowledge the harm you've caused, and become part of building something better. The server arrived with their meals, the interruption feeling jarring. Nathan looked down at his plate without appetite, his mind spinning with everything Emma had revealed. There's more, isn't there? Nathan asked when they were alone again. This isn't just about my past mistakes. There's something else you need to tell me. Emma smiled, and for the first time that evening, it seemed genuinely warm. You're more perceptive than I expected. Yes, Nathan, there's more. There's a reason Marcus was so insistent that we meet tonight, and a reason I cleared my schedule despite having no particular desire to spend an evening with someone who once dismissed me as beneath consideration. What reason? Your firm is in trouble, Emma said bluntly. Parker Investments is hemorrhaging clients, losing market share, and facing a shareholder revolt. You have perhaps 6 months before major restructuring becomes necessary. Am I wrong? Nathan's blood ran cold. The information was confidential, known only to senior leadership and select board members. How did Emma know? How do you? Because 3 of your largest clients are now working with organizations I'm connected to, Emma explained. They left Parker Investments because they felt the firm was stagnant, unable to innovate, too committed to old models that don't work anymore. And your name came up in those conversations, Nathan. Not as the problem necessarily, but as emblematic of the problem. Nathan felt sick. His entire professional identity, everything he'd built his life around, was crumbling. But here's the interesting opportunity, Emma continued. Those same clients, and others like them, are looking for firms that understand how the world is changing. They want partners who can identify value in unexpected places, who can build diverse teams that think creatively, who understand that the old elite models are dying. And you think I could provide that? Nathan asked, hearing the skepticism in his own voice. I think you could learn to provide that, Emma said. If you're willing to be humble enough to learn, honest enough to acknowledge what you don't know, and courageous enough to become someone different from who you've been. Emma pulled a folder from the bag beside her chair, placing it on the table between them. This contains a proposal. My foundation is launching a new initiative, a program that partners with investment firms to help them identify and develop unconventional talent. Firms that participate get access to a pool of exceptional candidates they would normally overlook. They also get training on inclusive practices, bias recognition, and how to build cultures that actually nurture talent rather than simply selecting for privilege. "You want my firm to partner with your foundation?" Nathan asked, beginning to understand. "I want you to bring this proposal to your leadership," Emma corrected. "If they're smart, they'll see it as the lifeline it is. If they're not, then at least you'll have tried. But either way, Nathan, this is your opportunity. You can continue being part of a dying system, or you can be part of building something new." Nathan stared at the folder as if it might contain something dangerous. In a way, it did. It contained the potential destruction of everything he'd believed about himself and his world. "Why me?" Nathan asked one more time. "Why offer this to someone who treated you so badly?" Emma's expression softened, revealing something Nathan hadn't seen before: genuine compassion. "Because 10 years ago I was where many talented people still are, invisible to the people with power, dismissed by the gatekeepers, told that I didn't belong in spaces I was more than qualified for. And I was given a chance, not by people like you, but by people who could see past surfaces to substance." She paused, holding his gaze. "Now I'm in a position to give chances, and I believe that everyone deserves an opportunity to be better than they were, even people who once denied me that same opportunity. The question is, Nathan, are you ready to take it?" The restaurant continued its elegant buzz around them. Other diners unaware of the life-changing conversation happening in the corner booth. Nathan looked at Emma Richardson, truly saw her perhaps for the first time, and realized that she was offering him something far more valuable than any business deal. She was offering him redemption, but she was also making clear that redemption would come at a cost: the death of his old self, his old assumptions, his old comforts. He would have to become someone new, someone humble enough to learn from those he'd once dismissed. Nathan reached out slowly, his hand hovering over the folder. This was the moment. He could take it and step into an uncertain future. Or he could refuse it and continue down a path that Emma had made clear led nowhere good. His phone buzzed again with another message from his firm, probably another crisis requiring his immediate attention. But for the first time in his career, Nathan ignored it completely. He picked up the folder. Nathan opened the folder with hands that wouldn't quite steady. Inside were professionally prepared documents, statistical analyses, program outlines, testimonials, and financial projections. But it was the first page that stopped him cold. It was a photograph. The image showed a diverse group of young professionals at what appeared to be a graduation ceremony. They were smiling, holding certificates, standing in front of a banner that read, "Elevation Foundation, recognizing talent, creating opportunity." Nathan's eyes scanned the faces, then froze on one in particular. "That's Jennifer Chen," Emma said quietly, watching his reaction. "Do you remember her?" Nathan did remember. Jennifer Chen had interviewed at his firm 3 years ago. She'd had impressive credentials from a state university, excellent recommendations, and a portfolio of innovative investment strategies. But during the interview, she'd mentioned working her way through college as a restaurant server. Nathan had been on the hiring panel that rejected her application, citing cultural fit concerns. She's in your program?" Nathan asked, his voice barely audible. "She graduated from our advanced training program last year," Emma replied. "She's now a rising star at Blackstone, managing a portfolio worth more than your entire division handles." The cultural fit concerns turned out to be code for, "We're uncomfortable with someone who had to work for a living." Nathan felt nauseous. He set down his fork, unable to even pretend to eat anymore. "There are 15 people in that photograph," Emma continued. "You personally rejected 8 of them from various positions over the past 7 years. Every single one is now succeeding elsewhere, not despite the obstacles you placed in their paths, but perhaps because of them. Rejection taught them resilience in ways privilege never could." "Why are you showing me this?" Nathan asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. "Because understanding the abstract concept of harm isn't enough," Emma said. "You need to see the actual faces of the people whose potential you dismissed. You need to understand that these aren't statistics or theoretical cases. These are real human beings whose lives you impacted." Emma closed her menu decisively. "We're not staying for dinner." "What?" You heard me. We're leaving. Emma signaled for the server, handed him her card for the drinks they'd ordered, and stood. There's something you need to see, and sitting in this comfortable restaurant talking in abstractions isn't going to accomplish that. Nathan found himself following her out of the Riverside Bistro, his mind reeling. His carefully planned evening had completely dissolved into something he couldn't control or predict. They stepped out into the cool night air, the city alive with light and movement around them. Emma's car was already waiting, not the luxury vehicle Nathan might have expected, but a practical sedan that suggested someone who valued function over status signaling. She opened the driver's door, then paused. You can leave if you want, Emma said. Call a car, go home, forget this conversation ever happened. Or you can get in, come with me, and see what your dismissiveness actually looks like in the real world. Your choice. Nathan thought about his apartment, his comfortable existence, his carefully constructed life. Then he thought about the faces in that photograph, about Jennifer Chen, who should have been his colleague instead of his reject, about the casual cruelty of the phrase, cultural fit concerns. He got in the car. They drove in silence through the city streets, leaving the upscale downtown area and heading into neighborhoods Nathan rarely visited. The buildings became less polished, the streets more worn, but there was life here. Restaurants with families eating together, small shops still open, people walking with purpose and community. Emma pulled up to a modest building with a sign that read, Elevation Foundation Community Center. Through the windows, Nathan could see lights and people moving around inside. We're here, Emma announced, turning off the engine. What is this place? Nathan asked. This is where we run our evening programs, Emma explained. Professional development training, mentorship sessions, skills workshops. Come on. Inside, the space was simple but welcoming. No expensive art, no marble floors, no ostentatious displays of wealth. Just functional spaces filled with people engaged in purposeful activity. Nathan could see one room where a group was working on presentations, another where someone was leading what looked like a negotiation workshop, and a third where pairs of people were engaged in intense conversation. That's our mentorship program, Emma said, following his gaze. Successful professionals donating their time to guide people who have ability but lack networks or insider knowledge. The kind of knowledge that people like you and me took for granted because we had access to it from the beginning. A woman in her 40s approached them, her face lighting up when she saw Emma. Emma! I didn't expect to see you tonight. Hi, Patricia. I brought a visitor. This is Nathan Parker. Patricia's smile faltered slightly, and Nathan saw something in her eyes. Recognition? Discomfort. Nathan Parker, Patricia repeated slowly. The Nathan Parker from Parker Investments? Yes, Nathan said, confused by her reaction. Patricia's expression hardened. Emma, can I speak with you privately for a moment? Actually, Emma said, I was hoping you might be willing to speak with Nathan. Tell him your story. Patricia looked between them, clearly conflicted. Finally, she nodded, gesturing to a small office off the main space. Once inside, Patricia sat behind a simple desk, her hands folded tightly in front of her. Nathan and Emma took the chairs across from her. Mr. Parker, Patricia began, her voice formal and controlled. 5 years ago, I applied for a position at Parker Investments. I had 15 years of experience in financial analysis, a proven track record of identifying undervalued assets, and recommendations from 3 senior analysts in the industry. Nathan felt a cold certainty about where this was going. Your firm invited me for 3 rounds of interviews. I took time off from my current job, time I couldn't really afford to take, and prepared extensively for each one. After the final interview, I was told the position had been filled internally. Patricia's voice remained steady, but Nathan could hear the controlled emotion underneath. 2 weeks later, I saw the job posting was still active. I called to inquire and was told that they were still searching for the right fit. Patricia, Nathan started, but she held up a hand. I'm not finished. I later learned through a connection that you personally rejected my application. The reason given was that I had taken a 3-year career break, and you were concerned about my commitment level and whether I could keep up with the demands of a serious position. Nathan's mind raced backward. 5 years ago, a candidate with a gap in her resume. He had said those things, not with malice, but with the casual certainty of someone who had never considered what might necessitate a career break. The 3-year break, Patricia continued, her voice cracking slightly, was because my daughter was diagnosed with leukemia when she was 7 years old. I left my position to care for her through treatment, through bone marrow transplant, through the hardest years of both our lives. She survived, thank God. And when she was finally healthy enough for me to return to work, I was told that my dedication to keeping my child alive meant I lacked commitment to my career. The words hit Nathan like a physical assault. He opened his mouth but found he had no words, no defense, no way to make this okay. "Do you know what happened after your firm rejected me?" Patricia asked. Nathan shook his head, unable to speak. "I had 3 more interviews at other firms. Each time when I explained my employment gap, I saw the same hesitation, the same doubt. My savings were running out. My daughter needed continued medical monitoring. I was 42 years old with a resume gap that apparently disqualified me from doing work I had excelled at for 15 years. Patricia paused, composing herself. I was applying for administrative positions, jobs far below my qualification level, just to keep income coming in. That's when Emma found me. Emma spoke for the first time since they'd entered the office. Patricia was referred to our foundation by a former colleague who knew her work. We don't care about resume gaps. We care about capability. Within 6 months, Patricia was consulting for 3 of our partner organizations. Within a year, she was managing a portfolio for a community development fund. Last year, the fund's returns exceeded the industry average by 8 percentage points. This year, Patricia added, I became the managing director of this community center. I oversee programs that serve over 300 people annually. People who were dismissed by gatekeepers like you, Mr. Parker. People who are now thriving because someone finally saw their value. Nathan felt tears burning his eyes. Patricia, I don't know how to apologize for that. I had no idea. You had no idea because you didn't ask, Patricia interrupted, her voice firm but not unkind. You saw a gap in a resume and made assumptions. You never wondered why the gap existed. You never considered that the same dedication and problem-solving skills required to navigate a child's cancer treatment might actually make someone a stronger employee, not a weaker one. You're right, Nathan whispered. You're absolutely right. Patricia studied him for a long moment. Emma told me you were coming. She said you might be ready to listen. I wasn't sure I believed her. Why did you agree to talk to me? Nathan asked. Because my daughter is 16 now, Patricia said softly. She's brilliant, driven, and passionate about economics. She wants to work in finance. And I need to believe that by the time she enters this industry, people like you will have learned to see beyond narrow definitions of what a successful career looks like. The simple statement carried the weight of a mother's hope and fear. Nathan felt something breaking open inside him. Not just guilt, but a genuine understanding of the human cost of his casual prejudices. Thank you for telling me your story, Nathan said, his voice thick with emotion. I can't undo what I did, but I promise you, I'm listening now. Patricia nodded, then stood. I have a workshop starting in 5 minutes. Emma, are you staying? Just for a little while, Emma replied. When Patricia left, Nathan and Emma sat in silence. Nathan stared at his hands, wondering how many other lives he'd damaged with his thoughtless judgments, his narrow criteria, his inability to imagine experiences different from his own. How many? Nathan asked suddenly. How many people like Patricia are there? Do you really want to know? Emma asked gently. Yes. Emma pulled out her phone, scrolling through files. In the past 7 years, you've been directly involved in hiring decisions that rejected 47 candidates. I've tracked down 32 of them. 24 are now thriving in positions elsewhere, often exceeding the performance of people who were hired instead of them. 3 are running their own successful businesses. 5 are working in the non-profit sector, contributing value that can't be measured in profit margins, but matters deeply to communities. And the others? Nathan asked. 2 left the industry entirely, burned out by constant rejection. 1 is still looking for opportunities that match her qualifications. And 2 I lost track of. I don't know what happened to them. The unknown fates haunted Nathan even more than the success stories. What if those 2 had given up entirely? What if his rejection had been the final straw that broke their belief in themselves? I need to see more, Nathan said suddenly. Whatever you were planning to show me tonight, I need to see all of it. Emma studied him, evaluating whether his intention was genuine. Finally, she nodded. "Come with me." She led him through the community center, introducing him to people whose stories chipped away at his remaining defenses. Miguel, who had been rejected from analyst positions because his undergraduate degree was in philosophy rather than business, and was now designing innovative investment strategies that combined ethical considerations with profit. Keisha, who had been dismissed as too soft for finance because she'd worked in education and was now revolutionizing how funds evaluated social impact. David, who had been rejected for being overqualified at 45, and was now mentoring younger professionals with a wisdom that only experience could provide. Each person Emma introduced, each story she shared, was another brick removed from the wall of assumptions Nathan had built around himself. He began to see a pattern in his rejections. He had systematically excluded anyone whose path hadn't mirrored his own, anyone who had faced obstacles he'd never encountered, anyone who brought perspectives he didn't immediately recognize as valuable. They ended up in a small conference room where a group was wrapping up a strategy session. Emma introduced Nathan to the team, and he recognized several faces from the photograph she'd shown him at the restaurant. "This is our advisory board for a new program we're launching," Emma explained. "They're all people who were rejected from traditional paths but found success anyway. Now they're helping design better systems." One young man, maybe 30 years old, looked at Nathan with curiosity rather than hostility. "You're Nathan Parker? Emma's told us about you." "I'm sure she has," Nathan said quietly. "I'm sorry for whatever role I played in making your path more difficult." The young man, his name tag read James, shook his head. "Actually, you rejecting me was probably the best thing that could have happened. It forced me to be creative, to build my own opportunities, rather than waiting for someone to hand them to me. I'm not saying your rejection didn't hurt. It did, but it also made me stronger." The grace in James's response made Nathan feel even worse, not better. These people had taken his obstacles and transformed them into fuel for growth, but that didn't absolve him of having placed those obstacles in the first place. As the meeting wrapped up and people began to leave, Emma and Nathan found themselves alone in the conference room. The energy of the space had shifted. What had felt confrontational at the restaurant now felt more like an invitation to genuine transformation. "How do you feel?" Emma asked. Nathan took a long breath. "Overwhelmed, ashamed, angry at myself, but also, I don't know how to describe it. I feel like I'm seeing the world clearly for the first time in years. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," Emma replied. "That's what happens when our comfortable assumptions are challenged. It's uncomfortable, but it's also the beginning of growth." "What happens now?" Nathan asked. Emma stood, gathering her materials. "Now you go home. You sit with what you've learned tonight. You read through the proposal I gave you. And then, in a few days, you decide whether you're ready to be part of building something different, or whether you're going to retreat back into your comfortable certainty that the system you benefited from is fine the way it is. And if I choose to engage with your proposal, then the real work begins," Emma said. "Because understanding intellectually that you've been wrong is the easy part. Actually changing your behavior, challenging your assumptions every day, being willing to be uncomfortable and uncertain, that's the hard part. And I won't sugarcoat it, Nathan. If you choose this path, it will be difficult." They walked together back through the community center, which was now winding down for the evening. Nathan saw Patricia working with a young woman, their heads bent together over a laptop. He saw Miguel laughing with a group of mentees. He saw evidence everywhere of talent that had been overlooked, potential that had been dismissed, people who were thriving now because someone had finally seen their value. "Emma," Nathan said as they reached the exit, "I need you to know something. I came to that restaurant tonight thinking I was doing a friend a favor by agreeing to a blind date. I expected a pleasant evening, maybe a professional connection, nothing more. And now?" Emma asked. "Now I realize that you and Marcus orchestrated the most important intervention of my life. You've shown me that I've been causing harm without even realizing it. You've given me a chance to be better, and I don't know if I deserve that chance, but I'm grateful for it." Emma smiled, a genuine warmth finally breaking through her professional demeanor. "Marcus was right about you. Underneath the arrogance and the blind spots, there's someone worth the effort of saving." "I hope so," Nathan said quietly. "I really hope so." As he drove home that night, Emma had called him a car since his own vehicle was still at the restaurant. Nathan felt like he was inhabiting a different body than the one that had confidently entered the Riverside Bistro hours earlier. That Nathan had been certain of his worth, secure in his judgments, comfortable in his privilege. This Nathan was none of those things. But perhaps, for the first time in his adult life, this Nathan was ready to learn what he didn't know. Nathan didn't sleep that night. He lay in his luxury apartment, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, the one he'd purchased as a symbol of his success, and stared at the ceiling as everything he'd believed about himself crumbled into dust. The folder Emma had given him sat on his nightstand, unopened since he'd gotten home. He didn't need to read it yet. First, he needed to process what he'd already learned. His phone buzzed constantly with work messages, each notification a reminder of the life he'd built on foundations that now seemed made of sand. Finally, around 3 a.m, he turned the phone off completely, something he hadn't done in years. The silence was both terrifying and liberating. When dawn finally broke, Nathan dragged himself to the shower, standing under water that alternated between too hot and too cold, as if his body couldn't decide what temperature would wash away the previous night's revelations. It wouldn't, of course. Some stains went deeper than skin. He dressed for work mechanically, reaching for one of his expensive suits before pausing. For the first time, he really looked at his closet, thousands of dollars of status signaling hanging in perfect rows, while Patricia had been applying for administrative positions just to keep income flowing, while her daughter recovered from cancer. The contrast made him feel physically ill. Nathan forced himself to eat breakfast, to go through the motions of his normal routine, but nothing felt normal anymore. The coffee tasted bitter. The news on his tablet seemed trivial and disconnected from anything that mattered. Even the familiar comfort of his morning drive to the office felt hollow. Parker Investments occupied 3 floors of a prestigious downtown tower. Nathan had always felt a surge of pride walking through the gleaming lobby, riding the private elevator to the executive floors. This morning, he felt like an imposter. Everyone he passed, the security guard, the receptionist, the junior analysts grabbing coffee, he found himself wondering about their stories, their struggles, the obstacles they'd overcome that he'd never bothered to notice. "Mr. Parker, good morning." His assistant Claire greeted him with her usual professional warmth. Claire had worked for him for 3 years, and Nathan suddenly realized he knew almost nothing about her actual life. He didn't know if she had family, what she did on weekends, what her dreams were beyond this job. "Good morning, Claire," Nathan said, then hesitated. "How are you? Really, I mean." Claire looked surprised, then cautious, as if suspecting a trap. "I'm fine, Mr. Parker. Thank you for asking. I realize I don't know much about you," Nathan continued, aware that he was venturing into unfamiliar territory. "You've worked here for 3 years, and I've never asked about your background, your education, your career goals." "Oh," Claire said, clearly uncertain how to respond to this sudden interest. "Well, I'm finishing my MBA at night, at Metro State University. I'm hoping to transition into analysis eventually. Metro State, not an elite institution." In the past, Nathan would have mentally filed that information under not serious. Now he heard himself asking, "What's your focus area?" "Sustainable investment strategies," Claire said, warming slightly to the topic. "I'm particularly interested in how firms can balance profit with social impact. I actually wrote my thesis proposal on—" She stopped abruptly. "But I'm sure you're not interested in all that." "I am interested," Nathan said, and meant it. "Would you send me your thesis proposal? I'd like to read it." Claire's expression shifted through several emotions: surprise, hope, suspicion, then cautious optimism. "Really? Really? Also, I'd like you to sit in on my meeting this morning with the partners. I think you should hear what's being discussed." "Mr. Parker, I'm just an assistant. I don't think the partners would—" "They'll accept it if I insist," Nathan said. "And I'm insisting. You have insights that we need, even if we've been too blind to recognize it." After Claire left his office, clearly confused but intrigued, Nathan finally opened Emma's folder. He spent the next hour reading through it carefully, and with each page, his understanding deepened. The proposal wasn't just about hiring practices. It was about fundamentally reimagining how investment firms identified value, not just in markets, but in people. The statistics were damning. Firms that maintained traditional, elite hiring practices had seen an average decline in performance over the past decade. Meanwhile, firms that diversified their talent pools, bringing in people from varied backgrounds, unconventional educational paths, and different life experiences, showed consistently stronger returns. The correlation was clear. Diversity of thought produced better outcomes. But it was the testimonials that hit hardest. Former rejected candidates describing how their unconventional paths had given them insights that traditional analysts missed. Clients explaining why they'd left elite firms for more innovative competitors. Employees from inclusive companies describing work environments that actually valued their contributions rather than just their pedigrees. Nathan was interrupted by his phone buzzing with an urgent message. The partners' meeting had been moved up by an hour. The board was demanding answers about the firm's declining performance, and they wanted strategies immediately. He gathered his materials and headed to the conference room, Claire following nervously behind him. Inside, the tension was palpable. The three senior partners, Harrison Webb, Catherine Morrison, and Michael Chen, sat at one end of the table with expressions that ranged from frustrated to openly hostile. "Parker," Harrison began without preamble, "we've lost another major client. Riverside Holdings moved their entire portfolio to Henderson Strategic. That's the fourth significant loss this quarter. Henderson Strategic, Emma's former firm. The firm that had recognized her value when Whitmore wouldn't." The irony wasn't lost on Nathan. "They cited our inability to provide innovative strategies," Catherine added, her voice sharp. "They said we're stuck in old models that don't reflect current market realities." "They're not wrong," Nathan said quietly. The room fell silent. Partners didn't contradict each other in meetings like this, especially not when board pressure was mounting. "Excuse me?" Harrison's voice was dangerous. "They're not wrong," Nathan repeated louder this time. "We are stuck in old models. We're hiring from the same schools, thinking the same ways, missing opportunities because we can't see beyond our narrow definitions of what valuable insights look like." "Parker, what's gotten into you?" Michael demanded. "You've been one of our strongest advocates for maintaining high standards." "I thought I was maintaining standards," Nathan said. "I was actually maintaining barriers. There's a difference." He pulled out Emma's folder, placing it on the conference table. "I received this proposal last night. It's from the Elevation Foundation, a nonprofit that specializes in identifying and developing overlooked talent. I think we need to seriously consider partnering with them." Harrison picked up the folder with obvious skepticism, flipping through the first few pages. "A nonprofit? Parker, we're an investment firm, not a charity." "This isn't charity," Nathan said, surprised by the firmness in his own voice. "This is survival. Look at the performance data. Firms that partner with programs like this are outperforming us. Henderson Strategic works with the Elevation Foundation. So does Blackstone. So do half our competitors." "Henderson?" Catherine's interest was piqued. She handled competitive intelligence and knew better than anyone how Henderson had been systematically gaining market share. "Henderson partners with this foundation?" "For 2 years," Nathan confirmed. "And their client retention has improved by 38% since implementing inclusive hiring practices. Their returns have exceeded industry averages, and they're attracting top talent that we're systematically excluding." "Excluding how?" Michael challenged. Nathan took a breath, knowing what he was about to say would be uncomfortable. "By insisting that talent only comes from elite institutions. By rejecting candidates with resume gaps without asking why those gaps exist. By prioritizing pedigree over capability. By seeing people like Claire here," he gestured to his assistant, who looked terrified to suddenly be the center of attention, "as support staff rather than recognizing that she's finishing an MBA and has insights we desperately need." Harrison's expression hardened. "You brought your assistant to a partners meeting?" "I brought a future analyst to a partners meeting," Nathan corrected. "Claire is completing her MBA with a focus on sustainable investment strategies. She's written a thesis on balancing profit with social impact. Exactly the kind of thinking our clients are demanding and we're failing to provide." Claire looked like she might faint, but Nathan pushed forward. "We can keep pretending that our old models are fine, that we're maintaining standards rather than maintaining privilege. Or we can acknowledge that we're failing and try something different." The conference room erupted in argument. Harrison was furious at Nathan's insubordination. Catherine was intrigued by the competitive intelligence angle. Michael was defensive about the hiring practices he'd helped establish. Through it all, Claire sat frozen, apparently unable to process that her career might be changing before her eyes. The meeting ended without resolution, but with a mandate. Nathan would present a detailed analysis of the Elevation Foundation proposal at the next board meeting. Harrison made it clear he thought the whole thing was ridiculous, but Catherine's interest gave Nathan a foothold. When everyone filed out, Claire remained behind, her hands shaking slightly. "Mr. Parker, I don't know what to say." "You didn't have to. I should have done it years ago," Nathan interrupted. "I've been blind, Claire. I've been part of a system that wastes human potential, and I'm done being complicit in that waste." Before Claire could respond, Nathan's phone rang. It was Marcus. "Nathan, we need to talk," Marcus said without preamble. "I heard you met Emma last night. How did it go?" "Can you come to my office?" Nathan asked. "There's something I need to understand." Marcus arrived 30 minutes later, carrying 2 coffees and wearing an expression that suggested he knew this conversation would be difficult. Nathan gestured him to a chair, closed the office door, and sat across from him rather than behind his desk, a small gesture, but one that felt significant. "Emma told me you were rejected from Whitmore," Nathan began. 12 years ago, by a committee that included Gordon Hayes." Marcus nodded slowly. "She told you that?" "She told me a lot of things, but I need to hear it from you. Gordon Hayes was my mentor, Marcus. He taught me almost everything I know about this industry. If he was part of the system that rejected you, if he was the one who taught me to think the way I've been thinking, then you need to understand who Gordon really was," Marcus finished. "Yeah, I figured this conversation was coming." Marcus stood, walking to the window that overlooked the city. "I applied to Whitmore right out of business school. My grades were excellent. My recommendations were strong. I had innovative ideas about market analysis. But my undergraduate degree was from a state school, not an Ivy. Gordon chaired the hiring committee. What happened? He rejected my application after the first interview," Marcus said. "He told me very directly that Whitmore maintained certain standards and that bringing in people from lesser institutions would dilute their elite brand. He said I should be realistic about my limitations and aim for more appropriate firms." Nathan felt sick. He'd heard Gordon use similar language dozens of times, had absorbed those attitudes like a student absorbing lessons from a respected teacher. "But here's what you need to understand, Nathan," Marcus continued, turning to face him. "Gordon wasn't evil. He wasn't trying to hurt people. He genuinely believed that elite institutions produced better analysts, that maintaining high barriers to entry protected quality, that the system he benefited from was meritocratic rather than privileged." "How can you defend him?" Nathan asked, hearing the edge in his own voice. "I'm not defending him. I'm explaining him. Because you need to understand that good people can perpetuate harmful systems without malicious intent. Gordon hurt me and hundreds of others like me, but he did it while believing he was upholding standards." Marcus sat back down, his expression serious. "When Emma and I talked about her research project, when your name came up, I saw in you exactly what I'd seen in Gordon years ago. Someone intelligent, capable, successful, and completely blind to how your success was built partly on excluding others. You could have confronted me directly," Nathan said. "You didn't need to orchestrate this elaborate setup with Emma. Would you have listened?" Marcus challenged. "If I'd come to you and said, 'Nathan, you're being elitist and you're hurting people,' would you have taken it seriously? Or would you have dismissed it as me being overly sensitive, too concerned with political correctness, unable to handle the competitive realities of our industry?" Nathan wanted to protest, but honesty compelled him to acknowledge the truth. "I would have dismissed it." "Exactly. That's why Emma and I designed last night the way we did. You needed to see concrete evidence. You needed to meet the actual people you'd harmed. You needed to understand the system you were perpetuating wasn't just wrong morally, it was wrong strategically. It was costing you and your firm real success." "Gordon retired 2 years ago," Nathan said quietly. "Did he ever acknowledge what he'd done? Did he ever understand?" Marcus shook his head. He retired still believing that maintaining elite standards was more important than recognizing diverse talent. His firm continued declining after he left. Last I heard, they're on the verge of bankruptcy. The parallel was too obvious to ignore. Nathan was following in his mentor's footsteps, not toward success, but toward irrelevance. "I don't want to be him," Nathan said. "I don't want to retire still clinging to comfortable prejudices while the world changes around me." "Then don't be," Marcus said simply. "But understand, Nathan, changing your mind is the easy part. Changing your behavior, especially when it costs you socially, when your peers reject you for it, when it requires constant uncomfortable self-examination, that's the hard part. The partners already think I've lost my mind," Nathan admitted. "Harrison practically accused me of betraying the firm." "Good," Marcus said, surprising him. "If people who are invested in the old system are comfortable with your transformation, you're not transforming deeply enough." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the conversation settling between them. "Emma's proposal," Nathan finally said. "You've read it." "I helped write parts of it," Marcus admitted. "The sections on competitive advantage, the market analysis showing why diverse teams outperform homogeneous ones. That was my contribution." "Why?" Nathan asked. "Why invest so much effort in trying to save someone who was part of the system that hurt you?" Marcus smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. "Because I remember what it felt like to be rejected by Gordon, to be told I wasn't good enough because of where I went to school, and I promised myself that if I ever had the power to prevent others from experiencing that pain, I would use it, even if it meant helping someone who'd been perpetuating the same harm. That's incredibly generous." "It's incredibly strategic," Marcus corrected. "Every person we keep locked out of opportunities because of narrow thinking is wasted potential. And in a competitive global economy, wasted potential is something none of us can afford. So yes, I'm being generous, but I'm also being practical." Nathan's phone buzzed with another urgent message. More client concerns, more pressure from the board, more evidence that the firm was in crisis. But for the first time, Nathan felt like he might have something resembling a path forward. "I'm presenting Emma's proposal to the board," Nathan said. "It's going to be controversial. Harrison will fight it. Some of the other partners will too. I might lose my position over this." "You might," Marcus agreed. "Or you might save the firm. Or you might lose your position and discover that's not the worst outcome, that there are other paths worth exploring. That's not exactly reassuring." "It's not meant to be reassuring," Marcus said. "It's meant to be honest. Transformation is uncomfortable, Nathan, but so is slow decline into irrelevance. Pick your discomfort." After Marcus left, Nathan sat alone in his office, the city stretching out below him through the window. Somewhere out there, Emma was working with people he'd rejected. Patricia was mentoring professionals he'd dismissed. Claire was finishing a degree he'd never taken seriously. Jennifer Chen was managing portfolios that dwarfed his own. The world he'd thought he understood was vastly larger and more complex than he'd imagined. And he'd been so focused on maintaining his position at the top of a small, exclusive pyramid that he'd missed the wider landscape entirely. Nathan pulled up his computer and began drafting an email. Not to clients or colleagues, but to Emma. It was short, direct, and more vulnerable than anything he'd written in his professional life. "Emma, thank you for last night. Thank you for seeing something in me worth saving, even when I couldn't see it myself. I'm ready to do the work. I'm ready to be uncomfortable. I'm ready to become someone different. Tell me what comes next." He hit send before he could second-guess himself. Then he opened Claire's thesis proposal, determined to actually read it with the attention it deserved. The transformation had begun. But Nathan was beginning to understand that it would be harder, longer, and more costly than he'd imagined. And somehow, that made it feel more real. Emma's response came 3 hours later. Nathan had been staring at his inbox, refreshing compulsively, when the notification finally appeared. The email was characteristically direct. "Nathan, transformation isn't a single decision. It's 1,000 small choices made repeatedly, even when they're uncomfortable. Especially when they're uncomfortable. Meet me at the community center tomorrow evening at 7. Come prepared to listen more than you talk. Emma." Nathan read the message 5 times, searching for warmth or encouragement, and finding only clarity. Emma wasn't going to make this easy for him, and he was beginning to understand why. Easy transformation wasn't real transformation. It was just performance, and Emma had already witnessed enough performance in her career. The following weeks unfolded like a slow-motion earthquake, reshaping the landscape of Nathan's life in ways both terrifying and necessary. The board presentation became a crucible that revealed exactly who he was becoming and who he'd been. Harrison Webb fought Nathan's proposal with everything he had. Standing in the conference room with the full board assembled, Harrison painted Nathan's ideas as naive idealism that would destroy the firm's reputation and alienate their traditional client base. "We built this firm on excellence," Harrison declared, his voice resonating with certainty. "Parker wants us to abandon that excellence in favor of social experimentation. He wants us to hire people from inferior institutions, to value feelings over performance, to pretend that maintaining standards is somehow discriminatory." Nathan listened to his colleague, someone he'd once respected deeply, deploy every argument he himself would have made a month ago. The words sounded hollow now, transparent justifications for a system that benefited people like him at the expense of people like Patricia, like Claire, like Emma. When it was Nathan's turn to present, he didn't rely on Emma's data alone, though the numbers were compelling. Instead, he told stories. He told Patricia's story, though he didn't use her name, how a brilliant analyst with 15 years of experience had been rejected because she'd taken time to care for a sick child. He told about Jennifer Chen, now thriving at Blackstone while Parker Investments continued declining. He told about Claire, sitting in the outer office with insights they desperately needed but had never bothered to access. "Excellence," Nathan said, looking directly at Harrison, "isn't about where someone went to school or whether they followed a traditional path. Excellence is about capability, insight, and the ability to see patterns others miss. We claim to value those qualities, but we systematically exclude people who possess them because they don't fit our narrow definition of what success looks like." The board was split. 3 members were intrigued by the competitive data Nathan presented. 2 were hostile to any change. 2 were uncertain, waiting to see which direction the wind would blow. Catherine Morrison, who'd been quietly reviewing the financial projections throughout the presentations, finally spoke. "I've been tracking Henderson Strategic's performance for the past 3 years. Their partnership with the Elevation Foundation coincides exactly with their surge in market share. Either that's a remarkable coincidence, or there's a causal relationship we're foolish to ignore. Or Henderson is succeeding despite their partnership with non-profits, not because of it," Harrison countered. "Then explain Blackstone," Catherine said, pulling up additional data on her tablet. "And Meridian Capital. And Silver Point Investments. All 3 have partnered with inclusive talent development programs. All 3 are outperforming us. At some point, we have to acknowledge that we're the ones clinging to a failing strategy, not them." The debate stretched for hours. Nathan felt himself being evaluated not just on the merits of his proposal, but on whether he'd fundamentally changed or was simply going through a temporary phase of misguided idealism. Finally, the board chair, an elderly woman named Margaret Sheridan, who'd been mostly silent, spoke with a quiet authority that immediately commanded attention. 27 years ago, Margaret said, I was the first woman partner at this firm. The men who ran it then told me I was an exception, that I'd succeeded despite my gender, and that opening doors to more women would lower standards. They were wrong. The women who came after me didn't lower standards. They raised them. They brought perspectives that made us better, stronger, more successful. She looked around the table, meeting each board member's eyes. I'm hearing the same arguments now that I heard then, just with different targets. We're being asked whether we want to maintain comfortable prejudices or build a better firm. I know which I choose. The vote was 5-4 in favor of a trial partnership with the Elevation Foundation. Harrison requested his opposition be formally noted in the minutes. Nathan had won, but the victory felt provisional, contingent, fragile. That evening, Nathan drove to the community center as Emma had instructed. He found her in the same small office where he'd met Patricia, reviewing applications from potential program participants. The board approved a trial partnership, Nathan said without preamble. Emma looked up, her expression carefully neutral. Congratulations. You must be relieved. I am. But Harrison is furious. 2 other partners are threatening to leave if this damages the firm's reputation. And I'm realizing that approval was just the beginning. Actually implementing this, changing the culture, convincing people to think differently, that's going to be much harder. Yes, Emma agreed simply. It will be. Nathan sat down across from her, suddenly exhausted. Can I ask you something? Why me? You could have approached Catherine directly, or Margaret, or any number of people at my firm who might have been more receptive. Why invest so much effort in someone who hurt you? Emma set down her pen, giving him her full attention. Do you remember when I told you about the document my abuela left me? The one about recognizing hidden value? Nathan nodded, though he was confused by the apparent change of subject. My grandmother cleaned houses for wealthy families her entire life, Emma continued. She was invisible to most of them, just part of the background. But she saw things they didn't. Their wastefulness, their casual cruelty, their inability to recognize what mattered. And she taught me that the people who can't see value in others aren't necessarily evil. They're usually just blind. And you think I was blind? I know you were blind. But I also saw something that made me think you were capable of sight if someone would help you open your eyes. Emma leaned forward. Marcus told me about a moment 5 years ago. Do you remember a junior analyst named Thomas Rivera? Nathan searched his memory and came up with a vague recollection. Barely. He was only at the firm for a few months. 6 weeks, Emma corrected. He left because the environment was hostile. But before he left, he made a mistake on a client presentation, transposed 2 numbers in a financial projection. It was an honest error, easily fixed, but it happened in front of several senior partners. A memory surfaced, Thomas looking terrified, while other partners mocked him for the mistake. Nathan had been there, had witnessed the humiliation. What you don't remember, Emma continued, is that after everyone left, Marcus told me you stayed behind. You found Thomas in his office and told him that everyone makes mistakes, that the error didn't define his capability. You spent 30 minutes helping him correct the presentation and understand what had gone wrong. You showed him kindness when you didn't have to, when no one was watching. Nathan had completely forgotten that moment. It had seemed insignificant at the time, just basic decency. Thomas told Marcus about it, Emma said. Marcus told me, and I thought, someone who can show compassion to a junior analyst when no one's watching isn't completely lost. He's just been operating in a system that rewards his worst instincts and punishes his best ones. The revelation hit Nathan harder than any criticism Emma had leveled. She'd chosen him not despite his flaws, but because she'd seen evidence that underneath those flaws was someone worth excavating. I don't know if I can be that person consistently, Nathan admitted. The person who showed Thomas compassion. I want to be, but I'm afraid I'll revert to old patterns when things get difficult. You will revert, Emma said bluntly. Change isn't linear. You'll have moments where you fall back into old assumptions, where you judge people based on pedigree, where you prioritize comfort over growth. The question isn't whether you'll stumble. It's whether you'll recognize when you're stumbling and correct course. How do I do that? By surrounding yourself with people who will call you on it, Emma said. By staying connected to stories like Patricia's that remind you of the human cost of your blind spots. By measuring yourself not against other people like you, but against the person you're trying to become. Over the following months, Nathan learned exactly how hard transformation could be. The partnership with the Elevation Foundation brought immediate changes to Parker Investments. Claire was promoted to junior analyst, the first person ever promoted from an administrative role. 3 candidates from Emma's program were hired, their diverse backgrounds bringing perspectives that challenged every assumption the firm had held. Harrison left to join a competitor, taking 2 senior partners with him. Several traditional clients followed, uncomfortable with the firm's new direction. For weeks, it seemed like Nathan's gamble might destroy everything. But then something unexpected happened. New clients started approaching the firm, younger companies, social enterprises, investors who'd been searching for firms that aligned with their values. Claire's thesis on sustainable investment became the foundation for a new service line that attracted significant interest. The 3 Elevation Foundation hires identified market opportunities that traditional analysts had completely missed. Within 6 months, Parker Investments' performance began stabilizing. Within a year, they were outperforming their previous benchmarks. But more significantly, the culture had shifted. Meetings included diverse voices. Hiring committees asked different questions. People like Patricia, who'd eventually agreed to consult for the firm, brought wisdom that years of traditional training couldn't match. Nathan's relationship with Emma evolved from confrontation to collaboration. She became an informal advisor, helping him navigate the challenges of culture change, calling him out when he slipped into old patterns, celebrating when he demonstrated growth. One evening, almost 18 months after their first meeting, Emma invited Nathan back to the Riverside Bistro, the same restaurant where everything had begun. "Why here?" Nathan asked as they settled into a different booth than the one where they'd first sat. "Because I wanted you to see how far you've come," Emma said. The man who walked into this restaurant 20 months ago barely saw people outside his narrow world. The man sitting here now has helped create opportunities for 37 people who would have been systematically excluded from your industry. Nathan felt emotion welling up. "I still make mistakes. Last week, I caught myself dismissing a candidate because her resume looked unconventional. I had to consciously stop and examine why I was reacting that way." "That's not a failure," Emma said gently. "That's growth. You noticed your bias and corrected it. That's exactly what transformation looks like." "Can I tell you something?" Nathan asked. "Something I haven't told anyone?" "Of course. I'm happier now than I've ever been. My income is actually lower than it was. I took a pay cut when the partnership initially struggled. My social circle is completely different. Some people from my old life think I've lost my mind, but I wake up every morning feeling like my work matters. I meet people who were given chances because I learned to see differently, and that satisfaction is worth more than anything I gave up." Emma smiled, genuine warmth in her expression. "Marcus said you'd figure that out eventually." "Marcus is annoyingly perceptive," Nathan said, making Emma laugh. "Speaking of which," Emma said, pulling out a folder, an echo of the folder she'd given him that first night, "I have something for you." Inside was a photograph from a recent Elevation Foundation graduation. 35 people in professional attire, holding certificates, standing proudly in front of their achievements. Nathan recognized several faces, people his firm had hired, people who were now succeeding because someone had finally given them an opportunity. "That's our most recent cohort," Emma explained. 12 of them received offers from firms in your network. 8 are starting their own businesses. 15 are pursuing advanced degrees they couldn't have accessed before. Every single one was rejected from traditional paths before finding us. And now they're unstoppable, Nathan said quietly. "Now they're visible," Emma corrected. "They were always capable. They just needed someone to see them." Nathan stared at the photograph, thinking about all the faces he'd never really seen during his first decade in the industry. How many talents had he walked past? How many Patricias and Claires and Jennifer Chens had been invisible to him because he'd been trained not to look? "There's something else in the folder," Emma said. Nathan flipped to the next page and found a letter. It was from Thomas Rivera, the junior analyst he'd helped years ago. Thomas was now a successful fund manager, and he'd written to thank Nathan for a moment of kindness that had kept him from giving up on the industry entirely. "I thought he'd forgotten," Nathan said, his voice thick with emotion. "People don't forget kindness," Emma said. "They might forget facts or figures, but they remember when someone saw their humanity. That's what you're learning to do consistently now. See people's humanity, regardless of whether they fit your preconceptions." As they finished dinner, a far more relaxed meal than their first, Nathan reflected on how completely his life had changed. He'd lost some colleagues, but gained others who challenged and inspired him. He'd sacrificed some status but gained respect from people whose opinions actually mattered. He'd given up the comfort of certainty but found the excitement of continuous growth. "Emma," Nathan said as they prepared to leave, "I need to say something I should have said 20 months ago. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for dismissing you, for blocking your opportunities, for being so blind that I couldn't see the extraordinary person right in front of me. I'm sorry it took public humiliation for me to open my eyes. And I'm grateful, more grateful than I can express, that you gave me a chance to be better." Emma reached across the table, taking his hand in a gesture of genuine friendship. "Nathan, you're not the same person who hurt me years ago. That person doesn't exist anymore. The man sitting here now is someone I'm proud to know, someone who's using his privilege to open doors instead of close them. That's all I ever wanted. Not revenge, but transformation." They walked out of the restaurant together into the cool evening air. The city sparkled around them, full of people with stories Nathan was finally learning to see and value. His phone buzzed with a message from Claire. She'd just closed a major deal using strategies from her thesis. strategies that traditional analysts had dismissed as too idealistic. The client was thrilled, and Claire was being considered for early promotion to senior analyst. "Good news?" Emma asked, seeing Nathan smile. "The best news," Nathan confirmed. Claire just proved that talent doesn't need perfect pedigree, it just needs opportunity. As they parted ways, Emma heading to her car and Nathan to his, she called back one final observation. "You know what the beautiful thing is, Nathan? You're not the end of this story. You're the middle. Every person you help, every opportunity you create, every bias you overcome, that ripples outward. Some kid who would have been excluded is going to succeed because you learned to see differently. And maybe they'll teach someone else. And maybe that someone else will teach someone else. That's how systems change, one transformed person at a time." Nathan drove home that night thinking about ripples. Thinking about Patricia's daughter, who would enter a slightly more just industry because her mother's story had been heard. Thinking about Claire's future mentees, who would benefit from her rise. Thinking about the junior analysts currently at Parker Investments, who were learning from his transformation, that people could change, that privilege could be used for good, that closed doors could be opened. The man who'd walked into the Riverside Bistro expecting a forgettable blind date had been completely destroyed. But from those ruins, someone better had emerged. Someone still imperfect, still learning, still stumbling occasionally, but genuinely committed to seeing people he'd been trained to overlook. Nathan thought about Emma's question from their first meeting. "You don't remember me, do you?" He'd remember her forever now, but more importantly, he'd remember the lesson she'd taught him, that the people we dismiss, the talents we overlook, the stories we never hear, they're not the problem with our systems. We are. Our blindness, our comfort, our unwillingness to question the assumptions that benefit us. But blindness, Nathan had learned, could be cured. It required humility, discomfort, and the courage to see things that challenged everything you believed about yourself and your world. It required someone brave enough to ask, "You don't remember me, do you?" And someone finally ready to answer, "No, I didn't, but I see you now."